Finally, my e-bike special, the long-promised episode where I would be talking about e-bikes. I finally put the footage together, and here we are, and we will discuss e-bikes because I am the prophet. I have seen the future, and I know it contains e-bikes, and my experience in Arizona is what convinced me that e-bikes are coming, and they're going to be a big thing, and I can envision how they are going to be incorporated into our usual road bike scene here in the United States. Not just road bikes, but cyclocross, gravel, and mountain biking. So just to set the stage here, I am just south of Prescott, Arizona, doing the Walker Road Climb. This is the old guy's ride, so I didn't make that name up. That's the name they give it themselves. And this is a group of people. They get together, they use Meetup, they plan bike rides on Meetup, and they get together. Almost all of them are retired. Now you're thinking, retired? They must be really old. Well, I've got news for you. It's the suckers like me and you that retire when we're really old. A lot of these people aren't old at all, and they just retired early, and what do they do with their time? They freaking ride their bikes all the time. So, does that sound so bad? Maybe I should retire early. I need to do an episode here where all I discuss is my thoughts about retirement after spending time in Arizona with people that retired early that are riding their bikes all the time. So, but we're mainly going to focus on e-bikes. So just in the ride here, I've somehow gotten gapped, and I don't remember why I'm gapped here. But it could have been that I was trying to help the people in the back, or I can't remember why. But anyway, it's not so important. What is important to know is that there are e-bikes on this ride. And I won't necessarily point out who the e-bikes are, at least not for a minute, but that's one of the things you have to realize. We're coming to a future where you're not going to be able to tell who's on an e-bike or not, at least by the appearance of the bike. You might be able to tell by the performance of the rider. So here I am closing this gap. And I was looking up some statistics just before recording this video, and I thought I had seen a statistic before that something like 50% of the new bikes sold in Europe recently are now e-bikes. I couldn't find that with 2 or 3 Google searches, but I did find additional data that suggests there are now estimates from the European Cyclist Federation that from now till 2030, in the next 11 years, there are going to be 150 million e-bikes sold in the European Union. So that's a lot of bikes. So that doesn't even include the United States. At the most recent trade shows, what was featured? E-bikes. When, let's see, what team was it? The freaking Quick Step in Tour de France on their rest day. I know, I'm forgetting what their new name is. But anyway, what did they feature? They featured, I believe it was the new Specialized e-bike, all to promote these road bikes that are actually e-bikes. And so, what is their utility? Why are they coming? How are they going to come? How are they going to be used, and so forth? So, those are things to think about. I think people think that e-bikes are just for people that suck or are slow or whatever. So, in what scenario would you see e-bikes be more common? Why am I seeing more e-bikes in Arizona than I see in the Dallas area in Texas? So, that goes to the nature of group rides and group rides in general. If you ride by yourself, do you need to have an e-bike? Well, it depends on how fast you want to go and how tired you're going to get. So, of course, there's people that commute with e-bikes. But in terms of recreational, fitness-type social riders that go out and riding for fun, who's going to be using an e-bike? Well, if you do group rides where people regularly get dropped, and that happens on group rides that do big climbs, people get dropped. On these roads in Arizona, as soon as you hit a climb, the group just completely busted apart. Even on the flats, the group just busted apart. There were no organized groups, or at least not to my standards in terms of coming from Dallas. So, if you don't want to get dropped, and you can't keep up with the people that ride around you, maybe you get an e-bike. If you live in a place where there's not many riders and you don't have a lot of options as to slow group versus fast group, here in Dallas we have, say on a weeknight, there may be an A, B, C, and D group. Well, you're going to find likely somewhere between A and D. The Plano Bicycle Association, they have people that might average, say, 12 miles an hour on their group ride. It covers like every imaginable level of fitness. So, you're going to have people that want to stay in the group. You're going to have people that can stay in the group, but they can't do it on the climb. They just don't have the power on the climb as far as watts per kilogram and so forth. They're going to want to have an e-bike. There are people that have health problems. So one of the guys on this ride, he's on an e-bike and he has some lung breathing problems. He's an older guy and he wants to be able to ride with his buddies, but he needs an e-bike to do so. Another one of the guys with an e-bike here is an older gentleman. I think he's in his maybe mid-70s or maybe he's close to 80. Again, without the e-bike, he would not be able to keep up on any of the group rides that he likes to do. Another gentleman among these Prescott, Arizona denizens, he has a mountain bike, e-mountain bike, and I think he just loves e-bikes. He has hacked his bike so that he can go above the maximum speed, and I previously posted a video Walker. This is okay. Camp Wood Road gravel adventure. I don't remember the exact title of my video, but in that ride, he's on a mountain bike doing gravel, and I'm chasing and trying to stay with him on his mountain bike. And some people just love the technology and just love messing around with stuff. People here in Dallas have been talking. There's a Cat 1 racer that I know is thinking about getting an e-bike, I heard, just for commuting and when he needs to do a rest day. He wants to go a little bit faster, not put out as much power, but not go super slow. So he's thinking about getting an e-bike for the purpose of training. Now, in the Dallas area, I've only seen maybe 2 or 3 e-bikes, and I've never seen an e-bike on a group ride. So I was just out and about riding solo, and older guy on a bike, quite obvious an e-bike by the dimensions and so forth, and I briefly got to talk to him about it while we were stopped at a stop sign. Was climbing up a little small hill here, not that far from my neighborhood, and a lady of considerable heft was going uphill at a reasonable pace, and I could tell from the make of the setup of the bike that it was definitely an e-bike. However, e-bikes, as I said now, don't necessarily look like e-bikes, and that's going to be one of the attractions of having an e-bike. It's not obvious to people that you're on an e-bike. And there's someone on this ride. We've already passed him. He's already in this group. He's on an e-bike. There are actually 2 e-bikes in this group right now. Which ones are the e-bikes? That's for you to figure out right now. One should be fairly obvious. The other is not obvious. Another thing I considered is Dallas is probably going to be the last scene in America with e-bikes. Perhaps not the last, but close to the last. And the reason for that is we have generally flat terrain here. So you don't need the power of the e-bike to get yourself up the climb because we don't do very much climbing. You can generally stay with the group because it's flatter. The second reason is there are just so many group riding opportunities that it's not like you're on a group with recreational riders who can barely make it all the way up to guys who could conceivably race, all in the same group. Here in Arizona, on a group ride, you might be in that situation where there's a wide array of abilities on the group ride, whereas in Dallas, you're certain to find that level of group ride that fits your fitness profile. So, for example, there's a lot of debate about e-bikes in the Dallas area on the online forums. For example, the Dorba Face group, seems like at least once a week there's a huge blow up where people are castigating e-bikes and talking about the horrors and danger and how terrible it is that people are on e-bikes. There's a strong resistance to the idea of e-bikes in this area. It really hasn't leaked into the road community as far as I can tell in terms of people's thoughts and resistance to e-bikes. It's just because we don't encounter them. The only people on, well, I haven't ever seen a road bike that is an e-bike here in the Dallas area. The two bikes I've mentioned were more of your sort of hybrid street bike sort of bike. But so no, we haven't had somebody say on the Pop ride, the Pop A ride, that's on an e-bike. That doomsday scenario has not come to pass. There's a local shop owner. I kind of asked him half jokingly, but I certainly would have taken him up on the offer if he had let me, if I could borrow or test ride one of his e-bikes and do the Pop ride and make a video about it, and of course credit his shop and stuff on the video, just to see what it would be like to go on a fast group ride on an e-bike and what kind of role I could play, how others reacted to that. Certainly something like, a pace car or moto pacing, you could accomplish that better with an e-bike than you could with a scooter or a motorcycle or car or whatever, because you're going to be able to very carefully and easily control the pace of the e-bike. On the motorcycle, it's much more difficult. It's also going to be safer. The e-bike is smaller. The e-bike is going to have people are comfortable drafting bikes. They are not as comfortable drafting scooters and motorcycles. Plus, you're not going to have all the fumes coming from a gas-powered motorcycle or scooter. There are a lot of advantages of perhaps having a friend on an e-bike. One of the EF riders, TJ Van Garderen, in the lead up to the Tour de France, they were talking about how he's been doing all this mountain training, drafting an e-bike, going up and down mountains, and how that was going to help him. Of course, he crashed out and didn't amount to much in the race, but that was not really a surprise to anybody. And yes, so getting back to the ride here, I guess I'm on the front. I don't think there's anyone in front of me yet. So hopefully if and when the e-bikes pass me, I'll be able to comment on it if I'm paying close enough attention. There were some local YouTube videos, when I say local to Texas, where a cargo e-bike was employed in the state championship road race at Fort Hood, which was used as the neutral feed zone motorcycle. It wasn't a motorcycle, but it was a cooler on a cargo e-bike. Just rode into the group, and riders could just reach into the cooler, grab water. He had little bins on the bottom, like a soft sort of bag that they could throw the empty bottles into, and it seemed to work very well. It wasn't a motorcycle, and just a rather large cargo e-bike. So that was a creative use of an e-bike that I had never seen before. So eventually the price of these e-bikes are going to come way down. So the e-bike here on this ride that looks just like a regular road bike, you can get, and I'll tell you later what the name and model of that e-bike is. I don't want to say it yet because I don't want to spoil your mystery about trying to figure out where the e-bikes are. You can get a version of that for, I think, around $2,500. I think that's probably like the aluminum frame version, but it's an e-bike. And I think we're going to get to the point where the average person that spends more than $1,000 on a bike is going to be likely to get an e-bike. I mean, it's going to be more than 50%. You know, it's sort of like, I think it's eventually going to get to the point where e-bikes are so cheap that it's going to be the odd person that spends more than $1,000 on a bike and gets a regular bike that isn't an e-bike. It's going to be, the guys that are into racing and fitness and that kind of thing. They're the ones that are going to get the e-bike. So shout out to Gino. I think that's him I just passed. He's formerly in Texas and formerly lived very close to me, did the Pop ride all the time, and now retired to Arizona, so it was good to talk to him. Here we are. So third wheel right now, and we are continuing up this climb. By the way, this is a really great climb. Not much traffic, as you can see, just a straight shot climb here. Not too steep, but certainly steep enough to do work. a few breaks in terms of going downhill a little bit, so a little bit rolling on your way up. If I lived in this area, I would definitely have this particular ride on the list, this particular climb on the list, in addition to the Skull Valley Loop and other rides that people do around this area. Plus, it was nice to be in a group, made it more fun. Okay, so it looks like we have a cross or gravel bike to my left. Is that the e-bike? Is that one of the e-bikes? We shall see, we shall see. So, we continue up the hill here. So how far are we into this video? About 15 minutes, coming on 16 minutes. So we'll get to the top of the climb. I think it's about 28 minutes, and the video continues after that. We'll do the descent and some other things, and I just left up the entire footage. I don't expect that I'll be talking over the entire video because I'll have certainly run out of things to say about e-bikes and bikes in general by that time. This was one of maybe my third day at altitude, maybe fourth day. So this is about 5,500 feet. Probably at the top of this climb we're somewhere around 6,000 feet in terms of altitude. I forget how many feet of elevation we did in terms of climbing on this climb, but well, it's not so important. But it was a really great group of guys. And another thing I've noticed with bike riders there, this guy just completely almost came to a stop. He's on a Laaf bike. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correct. L-A-A-F. I noticed that was kind of a popular setup in this area. So you kind of have and that's the front fork with the sort of leaf spring suspension system that you can, I think, attach to any road bike, but it's probably more commonly used on a gravel or cross setup, and it's just a different kind of suspension system. So I never got to use it, but it seemed like it was a popular thing, so probably worth investigating if I'm going to be looking into gravel or cross. The price of those are not completely cheap, but I assume that there's some effectiveness for it. Someone told me after the ride here that one of the riders here is a former pretty elite cyclist, that he was almost on the Olympic team, or that he was involved in the Olympic trials, or also that his wife was like a former Olympian, something like that. I can't remember the details, but he was on this ride, and here somewhere. I don't know which guy it was. So I guess that's another game of guesswork here. If Gino will know, or should know. Maybe he'll tell us in the comments who the former elite Olympic caliber rider, I think in track, but I'm not sure what discipline, I think probably track, was on this particular ride. Certainly wasn't me. I am not Olympic caliber. I'm just a middle-aged guy riding my bike. So then, if these guys ever do pass me here, I'll talk about each particular bike, and we can maybe briefly discuss which one of these may or may not be e-bikes. And so that's another thing. When e-bikes are present, you start thinking about them more, at least when you're new to them. I imagine over time you think about them less. And certainly on the rides that I do, a lot of the times I know almost every rider on the ride. So it's not a mystery to me, there's not like a whole bunch of people that I don't know. So over time, in the same sort of situation, I would know who's on an e-bike and who's not on an e-bike. But when you don't know who's on an e-bike, it kind of messes with your head a little bit. So you see someone go up the road and you're like, is that an e-bike, or is that just someone who's really fit? Or when I say really fit, my definition of really fit is somebody who's faster than me. And that should be your definition as well, no matter how fast or slow you are. Because you think, well, what am I chasing? Am I chasing a machine, or am I chasing a human being? And it kind of messes with you a little bit. It's like something that's on your mind. You're thinking about it. And it didn't bother me, but it's just something to think about. So here goes a rider past me. Is that an e-bike? I will tell you now that is not an e-bike. In fact, I think that's the guy that owns the e-mountain bike, but that particular bike he's on right now, that's the Laaf bike, L-A-A-F. Okay, so it is not him, but he certainly put a gap into me here. And no worries, just patiently patiently chase this back. I wasn't even pedaling for a second. They were doing a little bit of a downhill. No need to get too excited. What else do we have to say about e-bikes? The range of the e-bikes. So the road e-bike that I mentioned earlier that's on this right, I think the range was 50 to 60 miles on that particular e-bike. So here we are back caught up and going uphill again. So, on your group ride of 35 miles like the pop ride, that's plenty of battery. And when you think about how much power it can deliver, I think range so you have 3 settings on some of these bikes. The lowest setting is 100 watts extra boost. 100 watts is a lot of watts. 150 to 250, big difference. 200 to 300, big difference. 300 to 400, huge difference. I can put out 300 watts for a while. I cannot put out 400 watts for very long. And if you have that extra 100 watts just at hand for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, that's going to kill everyone else around you, unless they are somewhat superhuman. And just compound that by going up to extra 200 watts, extra 250 watts. So I think the highest setting for a lot of these on the road bikes, I think, is an extra 250 watts. That's a lot of watts to add to somebody. So, let's say you're putting out 150 and the bike's putting out 250, 400 watts. You can just ride on that forever until the battery runs out. You're going to put the pain on a lot of people. They will not be able to pass you. So it can take somebody that is decrepit and old and just trash the person that's fit and fast. So there's a bike that goes by. Is that an e-bike? Did we get a really good look at it? If I'm not mistaken, that is a Specialized. And if I'm not mistaken, if you look down, you're going to see an enlarged area around the bottom bracket. So yes, that first bike that went past me is an e-bike. It's a Specialized. Now what about that guy that just passed me there? That's an Orbea. Is that an e-bike? How many watts am I doing right now? I'm doing 250, 280 watts here. So I'm not doing nothing, and this is at altitude, and I'm not used to altitude. So this is not 0 watts that I'm doing. This is not just a pedestrian effort. If you look behind me, looks like everyone else is getting dropped. And so these guys are, I'm certainly not going all out. I'm not working super close that gap as fast as I can. And I'm looking at my heart rate, 146. So this is more like close to sort of FTP effort, tempo, but altitude tends to mess with my heart rate a little bit, so it's hard to interpret that. There's only one guy on my wheel now. Everyone else got dropped. Yes, that Orbea was an e-bike, is an e-bike. And that's the one, if you go back and rewind this and slow-mo it, you'll see that bike is virtually indistinguishable from a road bike. There is not an enlarged bottom bracket area. There is not a difference in the size of the tubes. The tubes are it's just a normal frame in terms of the entire thing. The battery is, I believe, in the down tube, and it is not enlarged. The only way that you can tell it's an e-bike is to look at the rear hub. The rear hub is sort of like a power tap rear hub would be, and maybe a little bit bigger than that actually. And the other thing is there's a button on the top tube, which is the control button for the delivery of power. So I had no idea that was actually an e-bike on the right. Now the first guy who went up the road, the older guy who's like 80 years old, I knew that was an e-bike because I had ridden with him before. And no insult to him, but he does not look to be in the kind of shape that should just completely ride away from me. So those are the 2 e-bikes on this particular ride that are just, doing the damage. I'm going over 300 watts here, and those guys are just riding away from me. On the second guy, on the Orbea, it was like, no insult to him, but looking at him, I didn't think, oh wow, that's a really fit, fast-looking guy, or a guy who's just going to ride away from me. So I was a little bit puzzled about that. Not that we can just judge a book by a cover, but when you kind of get passed by a guy who looks like, he does the fun wreck rally rides on Saturday at 16 miles an hour, and he blows by you on the climb, it starts, you start to wonder what's going on. Um, but this was just an example. So I tried to keep the distance to these guys. I wasn't really closing the distance. They're not really gaining on me at this point, but it's taking a significant effort to stay on, keeping those guys within sight here on this climb. Um, so those are and when we get to the end, um, what were they talking about? They were talking about their e-bikes, and people were discussing it. The guy on the Orbea, his that e-bike was new to him. I think this was, maybe only had it for like a week or two. And I think he was specifically planning to use it on a particular Grand Canyon ride. So he planned to not use the assist on the descent, but to use the assist on the ascent. And he had calculated that it would have plenty of power to do that relative to the time and mileage that he planned to do on that Grand Canyon ride. So I think plenty of people were impressed with the form factor of that particular bike, and the fact that these bikes are advancing in terms of how they perform, their cost, and what they look like. You talk about sleeper cars. Now we have sleeper bikes. You don't necessarily know at first glance that somebody is riding a supercharged bike that can just absolutely destroy you in terms of its ability to put out speed. And yeah, I think it would be really, if somebody gave me an e-bike, I would certainly take it. If I get one, so to speak, relatively cheap, I would certainly consider it. But do I have any current plans to get an e-bike? Do I want to invest in an e-bike? No. I don't think I would use it very much at all. I would hardly probably ever use it. So it would not be something that I would prioritize. Right now, I'm probably going to be getting a track bike pretty soon, a fixed gear bike. And I would really like to get a cross/gravel bike. I think that would be a lot of fun, just to change things up, maybe try a couple of cross races, and to do some gravel stuff, out of town in the country, far away from the hustle and bustle of traffic and these awfully bumpy roads that we have here in the North Texas area. I guess, does that make any sense to leave the bumpy asphalt roads for bumpy gravel roads? Maybe, maybe not. But it's not like it's smooth pavement that we experience here in the Dallas area. So how far are we into the video? We're about 28 minutes. So we're getting very close to the top of the climb here. And maybe this guy behind me, maybe he's the former Olympic caliber cyclist. I asked him if that was an e-bike, and he said, no, I wouldn't be getting dropped. Maybe it was someone else. Anyway, I asked somebody if he was on an e-bike, and said, no, I wouldn't be getting dropped if I had an e-bike. So e-bike on the mind in terms of wondering about people's performance and so forth on e-bikes. So I guess he pulls the parachute cord there as we get near to the end. And here I am traveling up to the end of this road. It continues as a gravel road, but of course we weren't planning to continue on gravel. We just do pavement, and we'll turn around and go downhill on this and do some other stuff, and that will be in the rest of the video. But like I said, I have seen the future. The future includes e-bikes. They are going to be common. You can bark at the moon, you can scream at the clouds. You are not going to stop the e-bike. The e-bike is coming, and you need to learn to live with it, because you won't have any other choice if you're into cycling. E-bikes are going to become a common part of the cycling scene. They're just going to be common. And I don't think that's a bad thing. If it gets more people onto bikes, out of cars, gets people into fitness, there's a role for the e-bike. And I think a lot of these worst case scenarios that people envision, like, oh, these really fast guys are going to just be really unsafe and like destroy our group rides. I don't think that's really going to happen. Group rides, they handle themselves. They patrol themselves. They're going to be okay. And I can think of riders that are a little bit over the hill that are plenty experienced, but just want a little bit of a boost, do the same group ride they've done for years and years, but maybe, you know, they tend to get dropped on a little bit of a climb. E-bike solves the problem. The weight of the e-bike, so this Orbea, I think he said it was like 26 pounds, 25 pounds. The weight penalty was not that much for the e-bike, and I'm sure the weight penalty is going to go down over the years with technology and better batteries and better energy systems. That weight penalty is going to go way down. So it looks the same, it's about the same weight or not much heavier, and it's going to give you a lot of leeway to have more performance and speed. It's going to help with commuting, getting places faster, less sweaty, less tired. E-bikes are coming. They are definitely coming. So thanks to the guys out here in Arizona that showed me the future. Here we see the two e-bikes and the two guys that are on e-bikes, the Orbea on the right and the Specialized on the left. Hope you enjoyed the video. Consider subscribing. Consider giving me a thumbs up if you liked the video. And stay tuned for more content. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.
Oh boy. So it tells you what it tells us, yeah, it tells what gear you're in, or what speed you're in. Now, do you have any indication? The brake's locked up and I keep going. Yeah, me too. Whew.
You don't get that in Dallas, do you?
No, that was fun. No, I'm still a little bit sketched out by downhills. So I'm like always, you know, worried about getting on the brakes. And
well, I have, as you can tell, I have wheels like you, but I don't like that coming down.
Once you hit your first deer, you'll get over it.
I'm sure. We were about to go down Iron Springs, and I guess his name's Mike. He's like, oh, watch out for the cars that come out and don't see you as you're going 45 miles an hour.
We were going down that on a ride.
counterclockwise the whole way. That was like 4 years ago. Yeah, that was tough because I didn't know where it ended. And I kept having these false hopes of coming up Galway to Prescott. No, I had never done the loop before. I did it 4 years ago. And I swear, first off, both times I did the loop, the high was 115 and 118. Yes. On my in Skull Valley.
Yeah, Skull Valley's
I ran 2 bottles and a 2-liter Camelback. I had run out in Skull Valley. It was like August or July. And I left late. Like I left the house at like 10 a.m. threshold, the number comes down. The higher the power, the more it comes down.
So it's not a fixed number. The more you keep, the lower your top power.
Right. Right. So that's why if you're super fatigued, you can't uncord the spray. Yeah, we do for the North Ride.
Oh, do ya?
Yeah.
I always thought that was tough compared to here.
Right. Right. Boy, group rides would be completely different.
Yeah.
If it was you transported everyone to Dallas here.
That's what I mean by you can't hide the pack.
Right.
You can't hide the pack.
Right. You're not getting that much of an arrow benefit.
So every little bit of ability delta is made.
Right. So for example, when I first went to go on the front, I didn't mean to gap the field. We gapped the guys. I was trying to
Everybody's trapped in the hole.
I wasn't, back to the start this way?
Yeah. The first turn off into the mall.
Okay.
And roundabouts.
Okay, I'll just follow you since.
Well, I'm not even I'm slow.
Okay, no, that's alright. We're going downhill. I'm in no rush. not an e-bike.
Yeah, it's not an e-bike. I wouldn't be going uphill this slow if it was an e-bike.
Right.
Bike ride. I just have got no energy.
Man, I
Had enough for one day, Earth?
Yeah, I think so. Except I got to ride home.
I got a few things going on. I had a
How far?
Well, I think it's about 8 miles.
Uphill?
I don't know. It's that way.
At least you should have a tailwind. Ay, ay, ay.
pretty bike.
And you're right as well.
My dogs are hard.
Tell you what, the electric helps.
The electric, it's an e-bike.
It is. No wonder you went sailing by me on the uphill.
Yeah.
Lee, you should have
It doesn't even look like an e-bike.
I know.
Where the hell is the battery in? Wow. How heavy is it?
27 pounds.
An e-bike is 27 pounds?
Hey. Well, you know, I was waiting. I was trying to wait till I was 70. So a few months shy, but you know,
Yeah.
I have asthma and COPD.
I've 35 years and they gave me through a test and that gave me, you know, it resonated. I went off all my meds. And I've been off all my asthma meds after being on it for 35 years.
I tried to carry that for I didn't
I
way.
didn't get it till I was 65 for a year.
Good for you. Anyway, so
Guy is a guy. Was he out? You guys? Tell about that guy.
Every now and then I get a tickle like it's coming
Now
back.
on, if we want to park up here, we got it.
Yeah.
He up by a Apache
Well,
Drive.
you can't do that.
They said they'll let us
What
do
kind
it.
of
They want to
battery
know what
life do
we're
you
gonna
get?
do.
It says 100 pounds.
I got this is only the fourth ride on it. So I got at 22 miles, I did 50%. And I had it on, you know, I'm still working. I had the lowest thing. I was trying to keep up with these guys. I was huffing and puffing pretty good. So I'm trying it on the different settings. Like I said, the lowest setting for the North Rim. We got 62 miles.
Yeah.
So it's just about 100 kilometers. But you know, I don't know if you've ever done that right. There's a couple long downhills on that, 4 or 5 miles, and just to shut it off.
I think it's 64 miles, but if you go to, if you're going to take it up, it's Royale.
We're going to Imperial Point. So
Imperial Point, that's
yeah,
6 miles.
now it's when you go there and then that makes it 62. You guys get the bagel?
We got more damn fish. You civic your cars here, do you move?
That guy just pissed me. Told us.
You know that the new building is being built right there by where we started driving that ride? Yeah, I just, yeah. No parking, man. So, you go north, south.
guys. It's guys in their 70s.
Really? Dang. I'm gonna hand it to you.
I'm not in my 70s.
I'm riding home from here too, so.